I think why don't we just get started?
Okay.
Thank you. As I said a few times, thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to use Dyslexia Awareness Month as our platform to New Mexico, as a platform to start our Read for Parents initiative. So I'm Aileen Cormier. I'm president of New Hampshire IDA. And for those of you that don't know about the International Dyslexia Association, we'll have an informational link at the end of this presentation. New Hampshire IDA represents Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. We're a group of parents and educators committed to the identification and remediation of dyslexia. We have a 15-member board of directors and are blessed to have many talented members with diverse skills. I want to give a shout out to our president-elect, Brenda Peters. She's the one that had this great idea. And has spent a lot of time getting this off the ground. So woo-hoo, and Brittany and Kelly, obviously. So how this is gonna work tonight is if you have questions for Kelly, I know that they had sent out an inquiry in advance to see if you had questions, and those will be answered during the presentation. But if you have questions during Kelly's presentation, if you could just type them into the Q&A session, and we will address them as time allows during the session. So let's get down to business. So our board member tonight that will be coordinating the Q&A session is Brittany Lovejoy. Brittany is a writer, the mother of 4 children with dyslexia, and a dedicated advocate for her children and others with dyslexia. Brittany is has a graduate degree in the Foundations of Education and Dyslexia Studies, and has spent time working as a special educator and in private tutoring. So our featured presenter for tonight is Dr. Kelli Sandman-Hurley. Dr. Sandman-Hurley is the co-founder of the Dyslexia Training Institute. She's a certified special education advocate, assisting parents and children through the IEP and Individual Education Plan and 504 plan process. Dr. Sandman-Hurley is also past president of the San Diego branch of IDA. She co-created and produced Dyslexia for a Day, a simulation of dyslexia. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube and it's awesome. And she is a frequent speaker at conferences. She is the author of well-received books, Dyslexia Advocate, How to Advocate for Your Child with Dyslexia Within the Public Education System, as well as Dyslexia and Spelling. And she's currently writing The Adult Side of Dyslexia. So without further ado, Dr. Kelly, here you go.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be the first person to present too, so I'm excited. Before we get started, would it be possible to have everybody put in the chat if you're a parent or a teacher, so I know who you are and why you chose to come to this presentation? Parent, and if you're, okay, lots of parents. Okay, that's kind of what I expected, and some practitioners. All right, perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my desktop so I can pull out my PowerPoint. And, all right, very cool, okay. So what I'm going to do is go over a pretty brief explanation about what dyslexia is, give just a few examples, and then answer some of the questions that were already sent in. And then I believe afterwards we're gonna take questions, is that right? As many as we can. An hour goes really fast. So I know that when I'm done, I think what happens a lot when I do a short presentation is that I leave you with a lot of questions, but that's why you have this branch of IDA. You can reach out to them and ask them, and I know they'll send links and lots of information, lots of places you can go for information. So what I'm gonna do is start out by talking about what dyslexia is and what it isn't. First of all, I like to talk about some facts and myths, or some myths actually, that are out there in the world that we at the Dyslexia Training Institute tend to hear a lot. The first one is that dyslexia is seeing letters and words backwards. It's actually not true. People with dyslexia see letters and words the same way people without dyslexia do. So this is the biggest misconception about what dyslexia is. They do confuse B's and D's and P's and Q's. That is true. And most kids do that through the end of first grade, beginning of second grade. Kids with dyslexia have a harder time figuring out, oh my gosh, hang on, I don't know why that came up. That's never come up before. Have a harder time discerning why you have a B grapheme, and then just because you change it in space, it changes its grapheme and its phoneme. So a better example of that is when we're born and I show you a picture of an elephant. If I turn the elephant around, it's still an elephant. If I turn it around again, your brain processes that as still an elephant. But now you go to school and I give you a B and I turn it around, now I'm telling you it's a P, and then I'm gonna turn it around again, and now it's a different grapheme with a different phoneme. So because people with dyslexia have trouble with language, and by language I mean written language, they have a harder time making that discernment. Having said all of that, not everybody with dyslexia makes those mistakes. So some people with dyslexia do confuse their B's and their D's, but not all of them. And having said that, it's not even the biggest part of dyslexia. It's a really small part of dyslexia. We also hear that she's in the 3rd grade. She's already outgrown her dyslexia. So you never outgrow your dyslexia. You're born with dyslexia, you die with dyslexia. It changes over your lifespan. The way it looks changes over your lifespan, and that depends on whether or not you get diagnosed. That depends on how it occurs on the continuum. Is it mild, moderate, profound, or severe or profound? It depends on intervention. It depends on a lot of things, but you never outgrow it. You are always dyslexic. So I'll say one thing about terminology as far as person with dyslexia and dyslexic. I just finished interviewing 50 adults who have dyslexia, and I asked each and every one of them which term they preferred, because I do go out in the world and speak a lot, and sometimes people try to ding me on the terminology I'm using. And I asked each one of them what they prefer. Do you prefer being called dyslexic, or do you prefer person with dyslexia? They do not care. Not one of them said they care. They said, as long as you say the word, I don't care what you say. So I will interchange the word. If that's something you get stuck on, just know that I'm extremely aware of it. And I asked about it, and I just exchange the word when I'm talking because it makes my sentences a little bit easier to produce. But you'll always be dyslexic. Like I said, if you're an adult, what you need will be different than when you were in 3rd grade. We've heard dyslexia is caused by a bump on the head. Yes, you can lose your ability to read and spell if you have a traumatic brain injury, or if you have a stroke, or something like that happens, but that's not the same thing as dyslexia. Obviously, we hear dyslexia isn't real all the time. So as an advocate, I hear that quite a bit. Usually in school meetings, dyslexia is real. If it's not real, my answer back is always, if it's not real, then what is it? What else can we call it? And the other thing is that the adults that I interviewed all said that having the label dyslexia was freeing to them, was liberating for them, because now they know what was wrong. And instead of like taking all that onus on them and feeling like it was them being stupid, or them not trying hard enough, or they're not getting it, now they have a reason for it. And then that reason also gives them a roadmap of what to do, if they're lucky enough to have an intervention and the support that they need. We hear dyslexia is just an umbrella term. This happens in IEP meetings, but in reality, the umbrella term is specific learning disability, and dyslexia is a qualifying condition underneath it. So if you are in the IEP process and you hear that it's an umbrella term, you can remind whoever you're speaking with that dyslexia is a qualifying condition listed under specific learning disability. Dyslexia has a specific definition and specific symptoms. It's not an umbrella term. We hear we don't work with dyslexia. We hear that all the time. This one cracks me up, because if you've ever stepped foot on a school campus and ever taught in a school, in a classroom, you've worked with someone with dyslexia. Just because you don't know that you work with someone with dyslexia doesn't mean that you do. And it has been in IDEA since 1974. So dyslexia has been covered under IDEA since 1974. So we have been working with kids with dyslexia way before that. So a lot of the adults I interviewed were in school before 1974 as well. So there's always been dyslexia. It's a kind of a human condition. It just didn't appear one day. And dyslexia is a medical condition. It is not a medical condition in the sense that you can go to a medical doctor, and like an MD, unless it's a psychiatrist, and get a diagnosis. So dyslexia is not something you can get medicine for either. So if you want to get diagnosed for dyslexia, you generally have to go to a psychologist or a neuropsychologist, or in some cases, a speech and language pathologist. But that's usually where you're going to get the official definition for, diagnosis for dyslexia. Any questions on that? Should I just wait till the end for questions? I can wait till the end. Just interrupt me. I like being interrupted. It helps me figure out what people are understanding, what they're not. Okay. So this is my favorite slide. This is what dyslexia is not. It's not caused by poor eyesight or hearing problems. Vision therapy or covered overlays will not help. So I want to be really clear when I say vision therapy won't help. I'm saying vision therapy is not going to teach someone how to read or spell. So I'm not saying vision therapy doesn't help people with vision issues. Dyslexia is not a vision issue. People who have tracking issues, poor tracking, the tracking is the result of dyslexia, not the cause. So be really careful about therapies or interventions that are kind of thrown out there that don't really seem to make sense. People with dyslexia, and I'll go into this in a second, have trouble with written language. They have trouble determining how to figure out how a word is put together, and based on how it's put together, how are they going to pronounce it or read it. If the therapy doesn't seem to try to help them figure that out, then it probably doesn't work. But if someone has serious vision problems, then vision therapy might be appropriate, but that's not my area of expertise. I can just tell you it doesn't help someone learn how to spell. And cover overlays, what those are colored transparencies, sometimes colored glasses that you can put, well, you put the transparencies over text, and a lot of people who sell this say that it helps people with dyslexia and migraines and autism and all kinds of things. They really don't. I mean, obviously it might help with eye fatigue or eye strain, and it might be kind of fun to play with for a little while, but it's not going to teach someone to read or spell. So you can use it as an accommodation. There's really no hurt in that unless it's being used as an intervention, and then it's harmful because you're wasting time. And the adults that I talk to really don't appreciate. Actually, I'm gonna take a minute to talk about this. The adults that I talk to know that when everything's being thrown at them just to see what will work, they know that that's what's happening, and they don't like it. And when I'm talking about the adults, I'm talking about their memories as children. So when they're children, they remember that people are just trying this, and they're just trying a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And every single time they fail at that, they internalize that as their own personal failure. So if we're going to use something like vision therapy or covered overlays or a computer program that says it's going to cure you in 40 hours, you have to be sure that that's really going to happen, because that child internalizes the failure. And most of those things will not work. So we just have to be really careful that we are remembering, you know, what it would feel like if you failed every single time you try to do something. I already talked about seeing words and letters backwards. It's not a developmental disability. It's not acquired, which I talked about, the traumatic brain injury. It's not a disease. I mean, you don't all of a sudden just get dyslexia. You can't cure dyslexia. It doesn't get, well, it does get better. It doesn't generally get worse, but it can get better, but it's not a disease. It's not a lack of educational opportunities. So it's really important when you're assessing for dyslexia, is that the person that's assessing it really takes a look at what happened from 0 to 5 or even 0 to 8 to make sure that there wasn't a lack of educational opportunity. Because if there was a lack of educational opportunity, that could explain poor literacy outcomes when they're younger. The good news is that if they don't have dyslexia, they just had a lack of educational opportunity, they're going to respond to whatever you give them much quicker than someone who has dyslexia. So make sure that anyone who's doing an assessment is really taking a look at those early years. It's not the result of a lack of effort or laziness on the part of the student. And I can't stress this enough. They are trying harder than anybody in that classroom. People with dyslexia don't want to not be able to read well. They don't want to be poor spellers. They don't want to let down their parents and their families and their teachers. They are trying as hard as they possibly can. If they could read and spell, they would. And read and spell well, I should say. Just because you have dyslexia doesn't mean you can't read and spell. But if they could read and spell better, they would. So that's really important to remember how much effort they're really putting into this. And most of the adults and even students that I work with, if I ever insinuate, even with my body language or my tone of voice or anything that I think they're not trying, they completely shut down on me. So I have to be really, really careful that I am never insinuating that they're not trying, because for the most part they are. Oh, I already talked about the medical condition. Okay. So let's talk about what it is. So we're going to break down this word. I work with morphemes. So I work with, here's the word dyslexia broken down into morphemes. You have two bases here, DYS meaning difficulty with, LEX means words, and IA is a noun forming suffix. So dyslexia is difficulty with words. It's not difficulty with eyesight or hearing or intellect or motivation. It's literally difficulty with words. So you have a student who's 7 years old and it's through 0 through 6, they've been really good at lots of stuff. They're good socially, they're good at sports, or they're good at art. They understand everything you say. They have great conversations with you. But when it comes to written language, everything falls apart. That's the unexpected part of dyslexia. And that's what it really is. It's really just not, it's having the intellectual capacity to do just about everything except interact with written language. And it's really important for me to reiterate that this occurs on the continuum. So some kids will have it really, or even adults have it mild, moderate, severe, or profound. So your mild kids are going to look way different than your severe kids. And so your mild kids might not even show up, or might not even show up on the radar until they're much older. Okay, so the IDA definition is a written out definition. So I took the liberty of just bullet pointing the important parts of the definition. I got kind of tired of reading it to everybody. So I put the bullet points here, and it's really easy to find the IDA definition. You can just Google IDA definition of dyslexia if you want to read the whole thing. But the thrust of it is that it's a specific learning disability. It's neurobiological in origin, meaning that you're born with it. It also has a pretty large genetic component, and it will run in families. However, it's really important to remember that it will look different from family member to family member. So you might have a parent who really just didn't like school. Maybe they weren't a good speller. They didn't like reading out loud. And all of a sudden now their child's in 2nd grade and their child can't read at all. And perhaps they're more profound. And then the parent, a light bulb goes on and the parent says, oh my gosh, I didn't like school either. So I think I also have dyslexia. And both of them probably do. Just one looks totally different than the other. So not everybody with dyslexia looks the same. And in fact, I've yet to meet one student of mine that looks exactly like the other student of mine when it comes to their list of symptoms. They have difficulty with decoding. So I'm sure if you're all parents of someone with dyslexia, I saw a lot of special education teachers, you've seen this. This is their difficulty being able to decode a word they've never seen before, or perhaps they see the word house in one sentence, they'll see the word house 4 sentences later, it's like they've never seen it before. So that is somebody with dyslexia. It also could be somebody who can read pretty well until they come to a more complex word, and then they start sounding it out from beginning to end because they really don't have any idea how to attack that word. Difficulty with spelling. I will take a second to go on a mini rant about spelling. I happen to think spelling should be taught in order to learn reading. And the problem with spelling as an advocate is that I go to IEP meetings. I'm just going to give one short story and then I won't digress again. But I went to an IEP meeting and I was obviously advocating for the parent. And this whole IEP team was talking about how spelling is not important. Nobody really cares anymore. You look at you have all this technology. And I worked in adult literacy for 12 years before I started Dyslexia Training Institute. So I worked with adults for a long time, and I worked in a low socioeconomic neighborhood. So I knew that this was untrue. And then I was thinking about it and I looked around the table and I thought, wow, I think everybody at this table can spell. And here they are making a judgment about whether or not spelling is important. And I'm here to tell you that spelling is extremely important. So we cannot just teach reading. So a lot of people refer to dyslexia as a reading disability. It's not, it's a reading and spelling disability. I've never met a person with dyslexia who is a good speller or a fantastic speller. They're decent spellers, but usually there's some issues with spelling, even if maybe there's minimal issues with reading. So if you are treating a student with dyslexia or you have a student with dyslexia, make sure that somebody is teaching them how to spell because it does affect their life. You can tell them not to worry about their spelling all day long when they're writing a paragraph. They're going to worry about their spelling. It will still get in the way of how they put down their thoughts, even if you tell them not to worry about their spelling. So make sure that whoever is working with your student understands how English actually works, or else you just kind of can perpetuate this idea that it's not important when it causes them a great deal of embarrassment throughout their life. That's my small mini rant, sorry. And then we have reading fluency. So obviously a student who's having trouble with decoding might have trouble with fluency. Fluency is a tricky one though, because you can have a student with dyslexia read something perfectly, have no idea what they read. And then you can have somebody read something with great difficulty and tell you everything they read. So that they're both dyslexia, but like I said earlier, everyone with dyslexia looks a little bit different. And that ties in with the next one, which is reading comprehension. You may have trouble with reading comprehension and you might not. Dyslexia can be a phonological weakness. So this is they might have difficulty manipulating the individual sounds in English. I'm hesitating because I'm also a linguist. So I'm really, I've been taught to be very careful with my word phone and phoneme and phonological awareness, but I'll take liberty and be a little bit more broad here. So phonological awareness is, say you have the word cat. Can you tell me what the word cat is without the k? And some students have difficulty with this and some don't. So some people with dyslexia can be decent in phonological awareness, but then it shows up in the orthography. So they might be able to manipulate the phonology of English, but then once they try to apply that strength to the written word, that's when it falls apart. So that's when some of these kids can get missed in those early screenings, because it only does phonological awareness or phonemic awareness, but doesn't really assess whether or not that's also matching up with how they're able to read sight words or remember sight words or spelling and things like that. Does that make sense? For those of you I can see. Okay. And I already talked about the unexpected portions. So dyslexia is usually unexpected because the child is perfectly capable of doing everything, and it's just this little weakness in the middle of all of these strengths. And that's a play on the words that Sally Shaywitz has used, which is the sea of strengths. What is it? Weakness in a sea of strengths, I think is what she says. All right, so here is my my student when she was in 6th or 7th grade. I just had her write a couple of things about what she wanted to accomplish. She said she wanted to graduate college, jump out of a plane, visit Paris, have 100 squishies, be an actor, go to Hollywood, go to a Taylor Swift concert, go to the Wax Museum. That's my favorite one. I love how she spelled wax on that one. It tells me a lot about what she does and doesn't understand, and drive a limo. So this is just an example of someone with dyslexia. If you're a parent or a teacher, I'm sure you've seen this kind of spelling. What she's doing while she's spelling is exactly what we've taught her, and she's sounding everything out. Unfortunately, in in English orthography, that doesn't work very well. So to sound out a word, to spell it, is going to fail within the first 3 words. So in order to teach someone how to spell, you really have to teach them how English works first, and then they can start applying phonemes well, that's not a good way of explaining it. Then they can start to figure out how to spell the word in the simplest terms, but you can't start with a sound when it comes to spelling in most words. And some of these you can, obviously, like jump, but look at graduate. You actually do hear that j. So instead you need to go and have a conversation about what it means. But that's for a different presentation. This is just to show you an example of what someone with dyslexia might look like, what their writing might look like. Okay, and then just a little side note, as I have gone through all of the transcripts of all the people that I have interviewed, what I noticed was that the way educators and professionals and researchers, including myself, were describing dyslexia is completely different than how people with dyslexia describe dyslexia. So when I asked every single one of my 50 students, please describe your dyslexia, and they all started with it was emotion. They started with a story. They started with something other than it's a phonological awareness issue. None of them said that. They all started with, it's hard, it stripped me of my life, they started with the emotional part. So we're speaking 2 different languages. So as educators and professionals and as students, we are not approaching it the same way. Educators are treating symptoms, and what the dyslexic people need is us to meet them at the table and talk about their feelings first, get their buy-in, and then go into the intervention. But if you don't acknowledge their pain and their frustration and just start in on a program, they've already checked out because they've already probably been through 5 or 6 different interventions. So just a side note. A big side note. Okay, so here are some oversimplified brain basics. This is my son. 2 years ago. So because I do this, I felt like I needed to participate in the research. And I'm not a researcher, but I enrolled him as a control subject at the University of California at San Francisco in Dr. Fumiko Haif's study. So she was looking for controls, and what that means is she's looking for kids who didn't have dyslexia so she could compare their brain activity to kids who do. My son does not have dyslexia. So I enrolled him and I tortured him for an entire day in San Francisco, and I put him in this I didn't. They put him in this MRI machine, and what they did was measured his blood flow during reading activities. So then they could use him and the rest of his control group, average it all out, and then compare it to the study group, which is kids with dyslexia, the same age, and approximately the same academic ability. And this is what you see on the right-hand side here when he's laying down and his head is in that box. What you don't see is right after that, they put a box on top of his head. And so I had to leave because I felt like a terrible mom at this point. But they did that so he wouldn't move his head, but I also think there was a screen in there that he could see. And then they put him in the MRI machine and he read words. And what they did was they got a baseline before he read words, and then they measured how his blood flow changed while he read words. So then they were able to determine what part of the brain was being activated while he was reading language, and then compare that to people with dyslexia. So when you're reading dyslexia research or you're reading the books on dyslexia and they talk about the research, this is what they're doing and this is what it looks like. And this was just the picture I got of my son's brain. This is not the blood flow. They didn't give that to me, and I suspect they didn't give it to me because that's their data. And I doubt that they're just going to share their data with everybody who walks through their door. For somebody who said thank you to my son, I want you to know he was bribed handsomely. He got to go to San Francisco for, I think we were there for like 3 nights. I took him to a Golden State Warriors basketball game, and then we did all the touristy stuff. So he's good to go, but still my mom was not happy with me, but that's okay. Okay, and so here is a picture from Dr. Sally Shavitz's book. I don't know, I haven't read the updated version yet. I don't know if she's updated this recently. This is from her original book from 2001. And so you can see on the left-hand side where it says typical reader, that is the blood flow pattern of somebody who does not have dyslexia, who's reading words out of context. And on the right-hand side, you can see the people with dyslexia also reading the same words, but you can see that their brain is activating differently than people who don't have dyslexia. What's misleading about this picture is it's not as though people with dyslexia aren't using the other part of their brain. If you look at the right side of their brain, which you can see on the right side of the screen, they're actually overactivating the right side of their brain. So it's not as though nothing's happening. It's just that they're trying to reach the reading part of their brain by going around the long way. So they're basically taking the long route to reading. And you can see that on the right side here, and this is the electrical stimulus instead of blood flow. And you can see, can you see the whole thing? I have some stuff covering it, but can you guys see it? Okay. So then there's the right side of the brain, you have the electrical stimulus here, and you can see the difference, what I'm talking about. People without dyslexia are using the left side of their brain, which is where the language area is located. But people without dyslexia are not using that as efficiently. So that is why they have trouble with reading and writing, because the brain is actually processing language differently than people who don't. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation about what it is. I'm gonna go into questions now. Do you want me to stop, or do you guys have any questions? Do you want me to just go into the questions? Okay. All right, so the first question I got was, if remediation helps, why is dyslexia a lifelong condition? I probably answered that a little bit during my presentation, but it's an interesting question. Remediation is helping the symptoms of the reading and the spelling, but people with dyslexia tend to always have a hard time reading at a quick rate. So they might always have a fluency issue, and they might always have, and not to the degree that they did before remediation, but dyslexia is part of who you are. And it's a hard question to answer. I thought it was going to be easier to answer when I read it and didn't try to verbally articulate it. But the remediation helps the symptoms. It helps the reading, it helps the spelling. You're still dyslexic. You're still going to read a little bit slower. You still might have to think about spelling a little bit more, and you're probably going to use accommodations for most of your life. So it's a lifelong condition in the sense that dyslexia is just part of who you are, and the reading and the spelling are one of the part of the symptoms of it. So hopefully that helps. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, can my child get accommodations in high school and college? Not only can they get accommodations in high school and college, but it's absolutely imperative that they do. So all these people with dyslexia I've ever worked with, even all the adults that I interviewed, every single one of them talked about the accommodations far more than they talked about intervention. So the reasons they get through high school is from accommodations, or the reasons they don't get through high school is because of the lack of accommodations. So they should always get accommodations. You can get accommodations in high school either through an IEP or a 504. If you have an IEP, you don't need a 504. If you have a 504, then you're going to have your accommodations, except if you're in Texas. If you're in Texas, almost everybody with dyslexia is on a 504, but your accommodations should be there anyway. That's a whole other complicated story. And then college, you're going to get your accommodations through the ADA, but you should definitely have accommodations in college, and don't be afraid to do that. However, the student has to advocate on their own to get those in college. Mom and dad cannot call the college counselor and advocate for them. There is a really good book by Elizabeth Hamlet, I think is her name. I'll check and I'll send it to you guys. She wrote a really good book about high school, about college and transitioning to college and accommodations in college. But 100% get your accommodations. Some of those accommodations are books on audio. Some of them are text to speech, speech to text, and then keyboarding is huge. A lot of my adults swear by Grammarly. I've never actually used it, but they all love Grammarly. And then as far as accommodations should start as soon as the student is identified. So even though this question is for high school and college, if you have a student in kindergarten, start getting those books on audio immediately, because they need to start hearing good literature. So if what happens is kids with dyslexia, or even if they're just struggling, they don't have that label yet or identification yet, are going to end up reading really poor literature because they're going to be using, you know, an intervention that is decodable text. But that's fine as far, you know, as far as helping them figure out how English works. But they should also be listening to good stories so that they know what a good story sounds like, because they have the intellectual capacity to understand those good stories via the auditory way, but they might not be able to access it the typical reading way. Keyboarding as well. Our kids can keyboard in kindergarten. Our kids have been around technology since the day they were born, so get them on those keyboards as soon as possible. Text to speech is a little bit harder. It's more for the older kids because it's harder to control and understand. But 100% yes, and it's absolutely imperative. I did have a student who transitioned to high school, was homeschooled all the way through 8th grade, really, really wanted to go to high school. And I flat out told him, you will fail if you don't use your accommodations. I just felt like I had to tell him that. And he uses accommodations and he's doing okay, but he's profoundly dyslexic. Okay, are there resources to help my child feel better about themselves once they realize they have dyslexia? I don't know if there are resources, but the fact that you are a parent who found this presentation and sent in a question is really all your child needs. So the children need to know that their family is there. They need to know that they have your support. They need to know that you're trying to understand. And that's really what the adults report to me helped them. The adults that have the parents there to support them and help them and go to presentations like this and ask questions like this, those are the kids that are going to be okay. And so I think, you know, to help them feel better, the other thing is to find other kids who have dyslexia so that they know that they are not alone, and they know that it is not like they're not the only ones out there. A lot of people with dyslexia do report feeling really isolated as children, like they thought they were the only ones in the classroom that had it. So if you can find other kids or parents that also have children with dyslexia, right now is a really hard time to say go out to a group. But you know, I'm sure there are Zoom meetings or something. I would encourage you to locate your local IDA branch and see if they have groups, or your local Decoding Dyslexia, and see if they have parent and children groups, and you guys can hook up with each other that way. Like now, like I said, now it's a little bit difficult, but I'm sure they're doing something. All right, my child's school says they cannot diagnose dyslexia. Who can? Your child's school's right, unless you're in Texas. So Texas can diagnose dyslexia. Everywhere else, schools cannot diagnose dyslexia. They can't diagnose autism. They can't diagnose ADHD. They only determine eligibility for special education services. So who can is a neuropsychologist and a psychologist, I think I said this earlier, and maybe a speech and language pathologist. So if you want an official diagnosis, you have to go to somebody with those credentials. Having said that, just because they have those credentials doesn't mean they understand dyslexia. So make sure you interview them and find out what they believe and understand about dyslexia, and then what they believe and understand is a good recommendation for somebody with dyslexia. Because if you go and get an outside evaluation and it's kind of crazy, and then you bring it back to the IEP meeting, then you're kind of back at square one. My child has been diagnosed with dyslexia, but the school will not give him special ed support. What can I do? This is a really hard question that I probably should have thought through a little bit more, because I would have to ask you 1,000 other questions in order to really give you a good answer to understand your particular case. But in general, just because your child has dyslexia does not mean you automatically qualify for special education services. That's something to be really, really aware of. There's a two-pronged approach to IDEA and eligibility. You have to have a dyslexia, and it has to be affecting your academics. So if you have proof that their dyslexia is affecting their academics, then you probably want to go ask an advocate or have an initial meeting with an attorney and see if you have a case or not. Again, I would look to your local organizations to see who they can recommend in your area. And I would really do that. Make sure you ask other parents who is recommended in your area, because they're going to tell you the truth about who's helpful and who's not. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about dyslexia. You want to make sure you get the right advocate and the right attorney if you need it. I do not encourage you to go immediately to an attorney. I do encourage you, if you want to and consult with one, but I encourage you to try to go through an advocate first if you can, or maybe in another parent who's been through the same process at your school might be helpful. But you should probably consult with someone who understands the law and understands your district. Would be really helpful, because all the districts have their own personalities. All right, oops, I got to move some stuff around to be able to read that. Okay. My child's school said she has a specific learning disability in reading. Oh, that's right. The neuropsychologist diagnosed her with a specific learning disorder in reading. This is the same as dyslexia. Oops, is this the same as dyslexia? Why don't these groups use the same terms? Because it could be the same thing as dyslexia. It probably is, but you'd have to ask the neuropsychologist to be more specific. They can put dyslexia in parentheses, because in the DSM-4, it is listed in parentheses after a specific reading disorder. So you can't, or learning disorder. So you can ask the psychologist to be a little bit more specific and see if they will do that. If not, ask them why they didn't do it, and then ask them if they think it's the same. So I would make sure you ask the psychologist why they didn't do that, and then find out if maybe they just aren't used to it, or what their reasoning is there. I don't know why the groups don't use the same terms. There's a lot of terms for dyslexia. It also varies from state to state and district to district. So there's just a lot of that in the dyslexia community. It's hard to navigate it all. But keep asking. The thing about advocating for dyslexia and understanding it is asking lots of questions and educating yourself and figuring out what's going on. Can school use the term dyslexia in the IEP? Yes, yes, and yes. And so if you go back to if you Google 2015 dyslexia guidance letter, you will find a letter from OSEP that actually reminds the school districts that they can use the word dyslexia in the IEP if the IEP team agrees. So you can also say red flags for dyslexia if they're not quite, totally in agreement, but you can use the word dyslexia in the IEP. You should use the word dyslexia in the IEP. You should push for it, especially if you have a outside official diagnosis. 100% it should be in there. That memo that I mentioned, I use the word reminds purposefully, because it reminded the districts that they've always been able to do that. So I call them old administrators' tales that people just pass down from administrator to administrator, saying you can't use that, but no one actually ever checked the law. So the law has always, or IDEA has always been very clear that you can use that term if everybody agrees that that's what the term that should be used. I've always said use the term verbally in the IEP often, constantly. Don't let down, don't back down, just constantly use the term. Say, how is this going to help someone with dyslexia? What about my student with dyslexia? And just, if you really believe and you have proof that your student has dyslexia, you should constantly use the term. Sorry. All right, so I left it open for QU and A, and I put QU there on purpose because Q is not a grapheme, QU is the grapheme. It's just like when you're at the airport and they say we're now stopping at Terminal C, Charlie, that drives me insane. It's not C, it's CH. So, you know, just being like that explicit with our language is what's going to help our students with dyslexia for sure. So I will stop sharing and then see if anybody has any questions. I think I saw a bunch, but I couldn't keep track of them all.
Kelly, there was some in the chat that have gone by, so I just wanted to, I'll read these, I wrote them down. What is the difference between mild, moderate, severe, and profound dyslexia? And also, is profound the same as triple deficit dyslexia? And it seems like they'd like to know about single deficit, double, triple. Thank you.
Okay. So single deficit is a phonological processing disorder. That's pretty much the only deficit they have. Double deficit is when they have rapid naming and phonological processing issues. And triple deficit is rapid naming, phonological processing, and orthographic processing. So obviously the more you add, the more severe they're going to be. But the difference between mild, just in a plain old phonological awareness dyslexia, mild, moderate, severe to profound would just be the more mild person probably can read and spell pretty decently, but probably has more issues with their fluency and their spelling. And then someone who's profound just has trouble with everything. And then everything in between. The other thing I should say is I've rarely come across a student who just has dyslexia. Most of my students have dyslexia, ADHD, ADD. Executive function is a huge one. If we don't acknowledge and try to help them with their executive functions, it's going to be really hard for them to understand how to read and spell. And then math is going to be really hard as well. And then there's some speech and language issues that also can co-occur, but not as much as executive function and ADHD or an ADD.
There's a woman, speaking of that, there's a woman here with 7 children whom she's homeschooling, and they have ADHD, ADD, and dyslexia, and she's looking for resources. What kind of resources do you recommend for her?
For homeschooling?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I could open that to all of us. Do you guys have suggestions?
I think it's the same. So I would suggest going out and getting possibly Wilson training or Gillingham phonological awareness training. I also love Explode the Code books, just as you have to, again, give instruction first, but to use. And Aileen or Brenda, do you have any additional resources? Barton?
One of the things that I like is the Haggerty materials, and you can get the videos now, the 36 weeks, I think it's 36 weeks of videos. So that's them professionally doing it. It only takes 10 minutes, and most of our kids with dyslexia are impacted in terms of phonological processing. So it would be something you could do at home, and it's under, they did have a sale on it, so it's very reasonable. It's under $80, so for a whole year. So that would be a great tool, I think, to look into.
That's great.
Well, and I also, David Kilpatrick's book, if it's somebody with phonological deficits, I think that David Kilpatrick has a great screener, and you could go step by step through the phonological remediation if that's part of it, because I think there's all different layers that you have to look at besides just the decoding.
And his book is $55, so it's affordable. Kelly, another person asked a question about spelling, and she said she has an IEP meeting coming up and spelling is not in her IEP. Should that go in her IEP? And what about the phonetic, like breaking down the phonics? Like how does that look in an IEP?
So if the student has a need in spelling, then they have a goal in spelling. So the mantra is the needs drive the goals and the goals drive the services. So anytime that there's an identified need, so if he or she is weak in spelling, that's a need. And that's also an area of life, it impacts their life. So if it's going to impact their life and it's a need, then there has to be a goal. So she needs to ask them why there's not a spelling goal if it's a need and there's a weakness, and she's got the proof that there's a need and a weakness. The problem is a lot of these tests that they do only do like one test for spelling. I know the Woodcock-Johnson only has one test for spelling. So I'm really big on qualitative data. So she needs to bring in spelling tests or any kind of writing that her student did without help, and, you know, share that with the team as more qualitative data, and then make sure that they're telling her why it's not in there, and then really advocate for it and explain to them why he or she needs it.
Okay. This is coming from a teacher. What can I say to convince parents that the slow reading rate isn't likely to budge much? This is a high school teacher, and it might be better to put effort into using accommodations rather than continuing to pursue the faster reading.
In high school, it depends on why they're having slow reading. I mean, if they're remediated and they're still having slow reading, then I agree with her that it should be accommodations. But if they're not remediated, then they need to be remediated and then add accommodations at the same time. So she needs to figure out why they're still slowly reading. But all the adults I talk to don't care how fast they read. And it really shouldn't matter. And I would tell adults, I tell parents this all the time, I don't care how fast your kid reads. I want them to be able to understand what they're reading, enjoy what they're reading. And if they need an accommodation to do that, then they should have it. But again, we have to figure out why it is they're still having trouble reading.
Can I comment on this as well?
Of course.
I've worked with students that have said how frustrating it is for them in school, because especially the children that are the older ones that could really articulate what's going on, because they say, I can do it, but the teachers just don't give me the time to be able to do it. They're trying to spoon feed me because they are slower. And then you also have to look at processing speed. And I do think that there is a lack of awareness in schools, many schools, and with many teachers on processing speed and how that can impact a child's ability to read and to grasp and to follow direction. And you know that we've all seen people that are timing these kids, expecting them to go faster when their brain, it can only go as fast as it's designed to go. And if you have a child with a processing speed deficit, which many of our students do have processing speed issues, that no matter how you remediate, they're never going to be able to read like this because their brain isn't designed that way. So I think that that's something for the parents that you really need to look at what the processing speed is and really battle to make sure that their teachers, the people that are working on the IEPs, that everybody is involved knows that they need additional time. That's just my comments on that.
That's great.
Very good. How can we help our child with the internalized failure he feels?
How old is her child? Did she say? You know, just tell them that it's going to be okay. Just be there and, you know, really support them in what they're good at. Really, really support them outside of school and what they're good at. I've had some parents when we don't have space and, you know, we tutor students. And if I say, oh, I only have Thursday at 3, and they say, okay, well, I'll just take him out of Little League. I'm like, oh no, no, you're not going to take him out of the only place he has where he shines, where he's the best. So just make sure you're really encouraging them to do the things that they're really good at and they really enjoy. Make sure they know that it's not the end of the world, and just be there. Let them, you know, come home and tell you about it, just understand. And like I said earlier, just by having you ask that question and having you here is really what they need. And, you know, Brittany, I know you're a parent, so maybe you can answer that question.
Sure. I found when my children started advocating with me, like in the legislation, or we did some bigger advocacy work, and they started hearing other children's stories at these advocacy moments. And the moment they did, I just saw one of my daughters, Rita, who's pretty significant. She was just like, Mom, someone can help me. Those other students are being helped. There's a way. And I think when you hear success stories of other students from students, it's very, very helpful.
I agree.
And I
and
think, sorry.
go ahead, Aileen.
That not
Oh,
being
I was just going to say that I think they feel so isolated. They're sitting in a classroom and they feel that everybody else can do it. I can't do it. They have a lot of anxiety. I work at a center where we tutor children after school that have reading disabilities. And one of the things that the kids that they find very comforting and empowering is they know they come here and everybody, they know that there are these other kids that have the same problems as they do, that it's not just them. And that's what I say to them when they first come in is, we work miracles. We don't understand why they're not helping you in school. What we do really, really, really works. All of the kids that come here from 3rd grade through high school all have to learn to read a different way, but they're really, really smart kids. And that is, I mean, I think if you could frame it that way, is that you just have to learn to read a little bit of a different of a way, that you're still really smart. And that sometimes helps them to know that they're just not the only person out there that is struggling learning how to read.
I agree. And I would also say to remind them that it's not their fault, that it's, I think Jonathan Moonen calls it dyslexia, that, you know, somebody just hasn't figured out you yet. It's not you, it's not your fault. I always tell my students, this is my fault. If you don't understand what I'm teaching you, it's my fault, not yours. So that just be their soft place to land.
And when I told my 12-year-old, I'm like, it's not your fault. She said, I know it isn't, Mom. It's you and Dad's fault because it's hereditary. So I got blamed a little.
Yeah.
She was right.
That's funny.
Somebody asked, how do you decide what accommodations to start with? And then a couple of times there's some statements about the school system, like not understanding dyslexia as a condition, and also, you know, battling with the school for the people who tend to have mild dyslexia, someone with spelling. And so how do they navigate the system, Kelly?
Okay, so the accommodations question is, again, it's what are their needs? And so you could, one thing that I like to do in my IEPs is just put as many accommodations in there as possible, and then just let them choose which one works for them. But as they get older, that might change, but at least they'll have access to all of it. The one thing that a lot of people don't know is that for every IEP, every time you have an assessment and a student is eligible for special education, then they also become eligible for an assistive technology assessment. So once they're eligible for an IEP, you should ask for that AT evaluation. Every school has to do that, and that AT evaluation will then determine the best that they can, depending on how good their AT is, what was really necessary for that child at that time. So I would definitely make sure you have that in the record. That also includes, the AT evaluation is also supposed to include training for the parent and the teacher and the child on how to use the assistive technology. So one of the things that happens with accommodations, and I'm kind of lumping in accommodations assistive technology, is that they give them speech to text, but then never show them how to use it, or never, warn them that it's going to take 6 weeks to figure out speech to text. So there has to be all that training in it, and that's all covered under IDEA. They are allowed, and allowed is the wrong word. They are supposed to have an AT evaluation as long as you ask for it. A lot of schools will push back on that because they usually do AT evaluations for students like with autism or people who have trouble communicating, but that's fine. Just push back again and say, no, my student has a disability and these are some of the things they can use, please assess for it.
And can I just jump in here too, because this is a good reminder, is for those of you that have lots of questions about accommodations, on December 9th, mark your calendar right now, we are going to have Carol and Michael Patton talking about advocacy. So I think that they will be able, that's the whole topic of their conversation. So I think that they will be able to provide you probably with a lot, be able to expand on what Kelly is telling you now. So come prepared with your questions or send your questions in advance. Go for it, Kelly.
I
forgot what the second part was.
I was going to ask another question. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Or do, okay. Should we spend time after school having our daughter practice reading, or just leave it to her intervention at school and let her listen to audiobooks at home?
Depends on the student. If she wants to do intervention, let her do it. If she is just burnt out and tired, I would let her choose.
And I would make sure that those books are decodable readers if she's at a lower level, that way she's really getting an extra dose. And so there's certain decodable readers that are better than others. And
Did
it's
she
very
say
important.
audio though? I
No,
thought
she was talking about, oh yes, she was asking if they should listen to just audiobooks at home or have her student practice at home. And that also depends on the emotional
yeah,
dynamic.
I would let them choose, especially if they're already getting an intervention, because they just want to come home and they're exhausted when they're working so hard.
I think another plus to the audiobooks is they want to fit in with their friends. And if their friends are talking about a book and, you know, the one, you know, how they're like the trendy things, and if they can't access the print because of their disability, they can still engage with their friends because they're listening to it and they still know what's going on. So that's another plus of the audiobooks.
I agree.
There were a couple questions here from teachers. I'm going to try to put them together. So somebody's asking, like, what can they do to help their school change? You know, what do you request for their school to change? And then another one, basically it's the same. So, sorry, I was trying to put two together. Go ahead, Kelly.
That's such a hard question. It really depends on where they are in the country, because some states mandate schools to be doing some things and some don't. But you should, this is going to sound like I'm just promoting myself, but I really think that the first thing they can do is do a simulation. So have, you know, request that the teachers do a simulation. We just did our simulation online for the first time because we're not traveling right now, and it went really well. So if they can request a simulation, and I think that really starts the ball rolling with the empathy. And if teachers can start with the empathy, and then before they have to go in to get all the training, I think that's a good way to start. I'm not really sure how to get a district to change. If I knew that, I'd probably be famous. But if you guys have any ideas, it's just a really hard one because it just depends on, every district has their own personality and their own, you know, what they've already purchased, you know, what they've already bought into. But I would suggest definitely a simulation, maybe send them some resources and videos. There are some really short videos they can watch online. Send them all kinds of free things that are short that they can research into, and then some links and see where it goes. But I'm open to suggestions.
I think we're going to end with this question, though I wish we could have ended with that moment. So a student has an emotional disturbance now. He has trauma because of dyslexia, and we hear and see about that. So to the anonymous writer, I'm sorry, and I understand. And they're wondering, what can they do to motivate him and help him with his self-esteem?
Yeah, that's really, you know, I feel bad that he's gotten that far. I don't know, maybe that goes back to helping him find other people that are like him. Is what I would think. I'm not sure how old he is, but if he's older, make sure there are people that he would also hang out with in real, you know, outside of finding someone with dyslexia. But I think the other thing that is really cool too is to talk to adults, not just listen to their stories on YouTube, but find an adult you can talk to that has had dyslexia and gone through it, and maybe mentor them through it. Somebody that they think is cool, you know, that they can relate to. I think that would be really helpful. Just making sure they know it's not their fault, and they're not stupid, and telling them how awesome they are and other things, and how it's not, you know, they'll be okay. But I'm open to more suggestions on that as well. That's a really hard question because I don't know what other factors are really playing.
I think getting appropriate services really does help boost the self-esteem.
Sure.
And finding a tutor who's really emotionally sound. You know, different tutors are also human beings, and finding a tutor who can really connect with your son.
Yes.
Another, I do want to, sorry, I know we're running low, but this is important. Parent was talking about scribing for their child all the time. She's wondering if she should stop, and also, you know, is difficulty to write answers and essays part of dyslexia? So yes, because spelling, if you can't spell words, it impedes the flow. And so the flow is going to change when you're writing. And so of course there's dysgraphia, which is a whole different topic, but they can interrelate. Go ahead, Kelly, about the, should she stop scribing?
I don't feel like I can answer that question without more information, but if they're old enough, I would encourage them to start trying the keyboarding or the speech to text. If the scribe, I'm not sure what she's scribing. If the student can do speech to text, that would be helpful to create more independence. But if they're younger, I would say don't stop scribing. My business partner still scribes for her 10th grade son. You know, she sits next to his Zoom class and just takes notes for him, doesn't, you know, do things for him, just takes the notes for him so he can pay attention to the content. There's nothing wrong with that. Some advocates might tell you to stop scribing if you're trying to qualify for services because they won't see that the student is struggling because you're helping, but that's a different situation.
If you're scribing too because you're taking notes, you could get something like an Echo pen, where the Echo pens are awesome. If you haven't seen them, you use a certain type of paper and a pen, and you only have to take really sketchy notes, and it can play back the lecture to you, portions of the lecture. So that's something, but I think this child is only 12, so I don't think they're doing that much note taking. But
I'm sorry, another question came up that's really good. And she says, do you have any advice for homeschooling moms? And we are doing a homeschooling segment in June, which is really far away, so we don't want to wait to answer your next question. Do you have any advice on decodable readers or websites? So right now, Flyleaf has some free decodable downloads, and Flyleaf has really nice decodable readers. Bob Books, the first 2 sets only are decodable. There may be more, but they're the only sets that I've found. Anybody else have recommendations on decodable readers? Oh, Spire.
Spire right now has free download decodables because of COVID-19, and Wilson has some as well. You might have to like poke around a little bit, but you should be able to find some decodables that are available because of COVID-19 right now. Okay.
is that it?
Yes.
Alrighty. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. As soon as this session ends, we're going to have a brief survey that we hope that you'll take a moment to answer. Your feedback will really help us build on what we did tonight so we can make our future presentations better. Reminder that tonight's session will be posted on our website for later viewing, hopefully within, Brenda, how often? A couple days? Hopefully
Yeah, it'll be there within the week.
Within the week. And so don't forget, December 9th, we're really looking forward to having Carol and Michael Patton discuss advocacy. Carol was one of the people that was instrumental in getting New Hampshire IDA started. She's been advocating for students with dyslexia in our region for many years. And this journey started because, just like you, she had to fight for services for her children. And one of her children will be there that night, and that is Michael. So we'll get to see his perspective as well. So once again, thank you so much. And we hope to see you at future presentations, unless there's anything else anybody else has to say.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It was amazing. And thank you,
It was
Brittany.
fun.